soon as John finds me, I will. We'll start the interview. Until then, how about the Cleveland Browns? What are they doing this year? I have no idea. I haven't watched a football game yet, and I'm lost. Yeah, we had some technical difficulties, and we had to open a new Google Hangout. So John might not have found us yet. Actually, I know he hasn't. So I'm just going to ramble. And maybe I'm doing things wrong. I'm learning. We'll just give it a couple more minutes. Let's see here. What can I talk about that's new and unique? 40K's got some new Pyramid spoilers out. Magic the Gathering's got another expansion coming in soon. Hey, he's here. You should be able to join. Why I don't see it. Well, anyway, he should be here any second, I hope.
What's up?
Hey, it worked. So I don't
Hey,
know.
sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm still learning this.
Well, hey, thank you so much for having me on Through Gamer Goggles.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for being the first actual interview on whatever live show I'm going to call this. That's about
So,
right.
quick question,
Okay.
because of course I have some people who wanted to watch that couldn't be at this time. Will this be available as like a YouTube video after the fact?
Yes.
Awesome.
Actually, we're streaming to YouTube Live,
Oh, nice.
which which I don't know how to change that. So there's 5 minutes of dead space. You know, I talked about football and stuff every now and then. Like, hey, I don't know where he's at. And,
Filling air, yeah, nice.
well, it's hard to fill air when you're alone. It it,
It's true.
it really
It's true.
is.
Well, you could have done like Shakespearean gamer monologues. I don't know what those would entail exactly.
No, I tried remembering the most recent news of things that I had seen. Um,
Hmm.
in the gaming world, like today I saw something about 40K gaming. I got some new material. Somebody saw a picture of a codex, and I'm like, okay, let's chat about that picture I saw for a whole 12 seconds. Yeah, so I wasn't prepared for Dead Space. But so your Kickstarter was pretty successful. I can't hear you.
How's that?
Well, that's much better.
All right, now, nice. We're gonna get through these technical difficulties eventually. Anyway, though, yeah. So, did you want to introduce me, or I can introduce myself?
I kind of thought I already did that, but yeah,
I might have missed
John.
that.
This is John Perkins. He goes by J.M
True.
Perkins when he writes, and I don't really know how long you've been a role player, but from talking to you in a couple of emails, I gathered that you are primarily a role player, and
It's
an
true.
author when it comes into role playing. And you recently wrote, uh, I just call it the adequate commoner, but it is the ultimate line through adequate. Correct?
Yeah, I like the strike through, but it causes some difficulties. Not least of which is you can't like say it well.
Yeah, you
Like,
don't.
there's no way you can kind of inflect that there's a strike through on the ultimate. It'd be nice if there was like a tense you could use, like the ultimate adequate commoner, and then people would just know what that meant. But that's unfortunately not the case.
Yeah,
So yeah, just the adequate commoner is sufficient.
yeah, you can't type straight through, and actually, it doesn't work everywhere on the web.
It's true. Yeah, my developer actually really, really liked that title with the strike through, but I've pretty much shortened it just because, again, it's hit or miss whether you can use that or not.
So, where did you get the idea for the adequate commoner? Or actually, let's back up a step. Did we cover everything you wanted everybody to know?
No, that's pretty much sufficient. Yeah, I've been a role player for a while now. Did a Kickstarter for a supplement called the Adequate Commoner, which is for Pathfinder primarily and D&D 3.5, but it can be used for a lot of things. So yeah, I'm actually really happy because for the last couple of months I've kind of been in promo mode for that, and now I can finally move back to writer slash maker of things mode, which is really nice. You had asked where I got the idea from it. I think I got the idea from it because I'm Henri, and I'm always interested in games, the things that you're not supposed to do, not breaking the rules per se, but just the things that nobody ever does that for this reason. So I thought commoners were really interesting because nobody ever plays commoners because they're underpowered. And so it began kind of as an interesting exercise for me to think, oh, well, how could you actually play commoners if you wanted to? And if you did that, how could you make them compelling? So yeah, it kind of just grew out of that. It started as I wanted to make basically a very short. It was going to be this tiny little project, like a 5-page optimization guide for commoners. And then once I started writing it, I just didn't stop.
Yeah, that much is certain. So when will the Kickstarter be fulfilled now? I mean, most of the writing's done, but
A lot of it's done, yeah. But actually, because the Kickstarter was so successful, I don't even know how many pages of new content I gotta make. I gotta do a whole new section on story feats for commoners. I have to do a whole other section of feats that I hadn't written before, new traits, a whole bunch of new NPC galleries, And so yeah, actually though, I believe we'll get fulfillment done with printing and everything done by April. I talked to my developer, my publisher today, really laid out where we're at, and yeah, it's looking like April, which is what we had set on the Kickstarter.
That's good. With all the new content, because it was quite successful. It was about 250%.
Yeah, yeah, something like that.
Um,
Yeah, so we met. Let's see, we met seven stretch goals, which was just huge for me and really really gratifying. It was just nice to know that like there's actually people interested in this weird kind of
well,
awkward idea I had.
I think a lot of that stems out of there's a couple of different types of role players. You've got your players that play a particular role. Me fighter, me go smash.
hmm
Or,
hmm
or me paladin, me take beating and lay on hands. Who are very set and content with playing their character in that MMO type of game. And
hmm
then
hmm
there's your players that are kind of in between the two of going from that role to actually into character development and starting to develop character, which is where the adequate commoner would really be a good tool for a lot of GMs who have those types of players. And then there's those players that would be your future actors or your Vin Diesel that are like, after playing for an hour, your voice changes and you start to take on the persona of that character. And it's
hmm
those two types of characters that I think this type of class is really designed for.
Definitely, definitely, I agree. The other type of players that I think that it can really appeal to, honestly, are min maxers. The guys who just love learning about all kinds of crazy rules. And yeah, you're not going to get much power out of a commoner for sure. But I think what it allows you to do is it allows you to pull on every trick, every odd little technique, all the weird source books you own, and do it in a way that's not game breaking. So the people who love like a min max challenge, I think can get a lot of mileage out of commoners, and I think that they can do it and still get along with the role players.
Yeah, I would say that's a definite. Yeah, I don't play with too many min maxers, so I always scratch them off.
You know,
Um,
they get a bad name, but I think it's a legitimate way to enjoy the game. The problem is though, is with that kind of play style, of course, get a little you got somebody who's just all about roll, right? And then you have a min maxer with them. Oftentimes, yeah, it's like, oh, it's great we have this role player, but they can feel as though they don't even contribute. So I like the concept of some kind of fusion of a game style or gameplay that would give both those people a place and something compelling to do. And I thought commoners could do that.
and that is a big key to role playing is finding your place within the party. So yeah, this
Oh no,
this
totally
does help fit that gap. Um,
right. Well, and the other thing too that I really like about it is I think that oftentimes players are to some degree hampered by the roles of their character classes. Like you had mentioned earlier, you got people who are like, I'm a fighter, I'm gonna go smash things. Well, and certainly you can play a fighter that way, and it's totally valid. But just because your class is kind of biased towards something doesn't mean your character has to be. So I thought it was an interesting exercise with commoners that there are no expectations about them other than they suck. I thought that that might be freeing for a lot of players because they weren't expected to be the healer. They weren't expected to be the magic user because they're a commoner. So there are no expectations about their characters. So hopefully for some, it'll actually allow them to have more freedom about what they're going to do. Surprisingly, with like less options, you would think.
well, I think there's a good bit when I read through it and I flipped through it, I was like, wow, this is really pretty amazing. You spent a lot of time with the original book. If it's been what 6 weeks now, so I think about the first 60 pages is really about developing the character in the class, and
Yeah.
there's not a whole lot beyond. I mean, there is stuff beyond that, like certain little nifty uh, pieces of equipment that you made note of, and you have a little guide in there for different archetypes of how to play the commoner,
hmm
which I kind of thought the book was going to be more about that than the actual hardcore class that you create, because it really is hardcore when you consider
Oh
that.
yeah.
It seems odd talking about a commoner in hardcore, but but it is, you know.
No, it is.
And
Well, and
go ahead.
go ahead. Oh,
Um,
please. After you.
but by the time I was done with the reading for the review, it was like, wow, this is like um, Dungeon Siege. The king is a commoner. He was placed there as a child, and then all of a sudden he's got to be the king. You know, it's like, oh yeah, I can see stuff like this happening all the time in D&D now.
Oh, definitely. Well, and it's just always so fascinating to me because I think with D&D, the kind of and Pathfinder, the bias and it's great. I love. Don't get me wrong. I wrote this book because I love Pathfinder. The bias is like it's an action game. The monsters that you encounter are these problems that you have to deal with, but that's well within the range of your capabilities. You had mentioned commoners being hardcore, and what I found so fascinating is that to take on the role of a commoner in like a high fantasy world, it very much moves the game more towards a survival horror game, right? Where you have no expectation that you are going to live through the day, and you might, but you are going to have a much different relationship with the environment, and I think a much more tense and a much more fraught relationship.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah, commoners are hardcore.
well, especially when you get into playing a group of them. Uh, you had talked about that in your book, and I was like, wow, he really thought about a lot of stuff with this. Um, how long did you work on it?
Let's see. So I started writing the optimization guide. I would say in February of 2014. And then I was writing that for a while, and I didn't intend it for commercial release. And a good buddy of mine is like, "No, you need to see if you can make this into like a commercial product." So then I had to think about, okay, so if I am going to do an optimization guide, which is mostly just like the best of the material that's out there, like, and I want to create my own material, what kind of value could I create? So I pitched it to a publisher in June, Misfit Studios, who are awesome, by the way, and yeah, and we Kickstarter. So I would say I've been working on it. What was that, 8 months?
About that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah, like I said, the drafting should be done like this month. We'll be playtesting for a couple months. My developer will have a pass. In the meantime, I'll be getting a bunch of art and looking at printers. And then, yeah, get it shipped in April.
Sorry, something was attacking my window.
Get out your light crossbow, man. It's the only weapon you're proficient in. Or maybe you don't consider yourself a commoner.
I don't know. I think I would use a quill.
Well, it is mightier than the sword.
That's right. That's why I would use it. Man. So, what's your next project?
That's a great question. So actually, I'm finishing up Connor, and in the process of that, I'm actually going to be doing a couple of like much smaller supplements because some of my backers had awesome ideas for just ways that they could do commoners, stuff like that. So I'll be developing those. And then, kind of separate from that, of course, I have a traditional kind of fiction career. So it's coming out in the next couple months, and I actually recently got a literary agent, so I'll be working on a nonfiction book proposal with her. It's not gamer, but just to give you the quick pitch, I was raised, and actually this does factor into the adequate commoner. I was raised by survivalists, and so I kind of want to do this book, which is all about second generation survivalists and basically looking at people like myself who are kind of raised with a sincere belief that the world was probably going to end in our lifetime, and kind of what that does to people, or rather, a better way to say it is what people do with that. Like, how do they take that kind of mindset, and do they accept it? Do they reject it? How do they incorporate that into the rest of their lives? And that's probably one of the things that's been a common thread in my writing, and definitely was in Adequate Commoner, is you have fantasy monsters or you have a high fantasy world. And again, the expectation is players will be fighters and what have you. But I'm really curious of, well, how do ordinary people actually deal with this? Because the answer sometimes is, well, they just die. In the case of commoners, lots of them would die from these monster attacks. But
That's right.
the answer is not all of them would die, and a lot of them would just be too ornery to go down without swinging. And with enough of them, you start developing tactics, and yeah, they end up surprising people.
Well, the good news is that just because of the fact that you're playing one of these people, these commoners, is that you're probably one of the survivors.
Yeah, exactly.
At least
Well,
for a short while.
well, you were one of the ones that, for whatever reason, whether it was necessity or just like, because in rules as written, like the amount that adventurers make is just like a
Ridiculous.
thousand lifetimes of a commoner wage. So you'd think that at least some of these people would be tempted down that path just because it's so lucrative to go out killing monsters and raiding dungeons.
Yeah, that might be one. I was thinking more like down the lines of the apocalypse type thing happening, and my village was just wiped out. And if I don't pick up that warrior's sword, I'm gonna die.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Mm-hmm. And like, hey, maybe there's a group of adventurers you tricked into like trying to dealing with your problems, but they're all dead now. So now what do you do? I just don't think people just line up for the kobolds and say, okay, well, decapitate us. That's enough of that. Um,
Most probably not, especially
right?
kobolds. They're small.
Totally. Um, yeah. So how are things going with through gamer goggles?
Things are going pretty good. My my social media stuff's growing. My subscription rate is the last couple months through the roof for YouTube. Um,
Nice.
well, it's the first time I learned some things this summer. I started to put myself on a consistent schedule. In the last 2 weeks, it hasn't been as good as it should have been, but I'm still growing. I mean, like tonight, I had a miniatures video that was supposed to go up, and I went to put my annotations in for subscribing,
Hmm.
and for whatever reason, it's 54 minutes long, and I'm like, what happened? There's some extra audio or something on the video, and I got to go find it and delete it out. So I have to postpone my posting until tomorrow, so I can fix the video and re edit it, not re-edit it, but re format it. I guess is the right way to say it. So I mean, but it's growing, and we're getting ready to do a Patreon. So I'm hoping that that'll help out because now that I'm looking to do it full time, something like that will help a lot.
Definitely.
Well,
Definitely. Patreon's really interesting.
they are. Um, I'm going to say the same thing I said about my Kickstarter that I did to go to Gen Con. I
Hmm.
don't think people are using them the right way for blogging. I think
Hmm.
they're well. For example, if you look at some of the Kickstarters for things like going to Gen Con or the season of a blog, like for 1 year, help support us for a year, and we can do
Hmm.
this, 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 and this. I would say close to 95 to 99% of the stretch goals are me based.
Mm.
But if you take a Kickstarter and you look at a board game or a role playing game or a miniatures game, all the stretch goals are customer based. They're like opposite.
Interesting.
Yeah, well,
Interesting.
I mean, you look at them, it's like, oh, if we make $5,000 with our stretch goal, we'll buy a new camera to do this, this, and this. Or, you'll get a, a pledge level, they'll get a coffee cup, or they'll get a t-shirt, um, and things like that that aren't necessarily the greatest rewards, but it's a blog, so you have to get down to the real meat of the issue, and the meat of the issue with a blog is it's a service. So
Mm.
the only way you're going to really have a successful Kickstarter is if you sell that service and make your service better. Which
Yeah.
a camera does that, but again, it's like give me the goodies so that I can use them and share more stuff with you. I'm not sure that's the
Interesting.
right approach for a Kickstarter.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is, and you might well be right, but it's just so new, right? Like we tend to think of, again, I think working as creatives, we Kickstarter has almost become old hat for us. But gosh, it's what, 4 years old, if that. I think there is still tons of opportunity for people to figure out, again, maybe not the right way is a better way, but a better way. And I think that we're just going to have a lot of experimentation, a lot of trying, and there's always been some like practices consolidating. But that is an interesting kind of difference, and that might be something that shapes up with Kickstarter versus Patreon. Is it might end up being that Kickstarter is more about I want to do this product or this project, and Patreon is more I want you to support me.
Oh,
And
I'm sure that day's coming.
right, and exactly, I think that it might become much more commonly accepted what each is for. And people will have a much clearer picture of okay, so if you want to do this, Patreon's probably better. If you want to do this, Kickstarter is probably better.
Yeah, I don't think
I,
Patreon's caught on yet. I mean, there's
it's getting there, man.
well, there's some people. I mean, if you take a look at Patreon, there's some. Well, they're not all blogs, but there's some creatives that are using Patreon where they're getting $12,000 a month.
Yeah.
And then
Oh
there's
yeah.
others that started, I don't know, 2.5, 3 years ago that are getting nothing.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
You know, and
Yeah. Feast or famine.
I mean, the big thing that for Kickstarter when I was looking at doing mine to go to Gen Con, the big thing that I looked at is I looked at it and I'm like, well, I did two actually. The first one failed miserably because I included promotional items,
Mm.
all of which are things that I have to pay for. So it raises the cost of the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
I had pens, badge holders, uh, the T-shirts. I managed to keep the Three Gamer Goggles T-shirts with me on the cover. You can't see me yet. There I am getting eaten by a troll. That's the Gen Con troll from a couple years ago.
Mhm.
Um, and I had bags in place and things like that. But the minimum I was going to need to go to Gen Con was like almost $4,000.
Because of all the promotional items.
Well, not only all the promotional items, but you have to buy X amount of each kind.
Yeah. Mhm.
So you kind of have to figure that into your costs. So you need to have this many people, and I raised like $600. I had $600. The next
Mhm.
one, I'm like, I just have to focus on the service. And I
Yeah.
focused on doing Kickstarter previews and increasing the amount of things that I did at Gen Con for the viewers to make it a better experience for them. And I actually learned quite a bit. Uh, but I raised almost 200%. But we're now more like 160, 170%. And
Yeah. Good for you.
most of that came from Kickstarter previews. So my biggest audience was game designers, but if you look at my Kickstarter, that was the best service that I offered. So
Yeah. Oh
I'm
yeah.
getting, I'm starting to think about next year and how I'm going to approach the Gen Con Kickstarter and how I can improve it. But I don't know. It just sometimes when I was trying to create it, I felt a little dirty about some of the things. So well, it's like wow, this guy's going to give me $40, and what am I giving him in return? You know,
That's yeah. That's something that you have to work on. As any kind of working creative, that ability and the confidence to ask people for money and the trust that if they are giving you money, like they wanted to give you that and they wanted whatever you were offering and it was worthwhile to them.
well,
I think it's something that you definitely kind of have to learn on your own. I don't think anybody teaches you, and I don't know any way to learn it other than just
that you just have to kind of go and do. It's like, I mean, I,
right.
the biggest thing that I learned was the audience that wanted me to go to Gen Con were volunteers,
Hmm.
exhibitors, or game designers. Those were the biggies. Um, and they were from a couple, well, I shouldn't say they were from a couple of different schools, but a lot of the um, backers that weren't producer level or Kickstarter preview level were miniature gamers or Magic players that I used to either judge for or went to like the Pro Tour, um, which
Nice.
which is kind of funny because I don't do too much Magic the Gathering anymore. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. I've got three children, so I don't have a lot
Yeah.
of time and I don't have a lot of money.
Oh yeah. No, Magic. It's the Magic is such a cool game, and the art is so beautiful. Even if you have no interest in the game, the art is just gorgeous.
You only get to
But yeah,
meet the artists too. It gets better after you've met them. I've got so many prints, it's not funny.
but it's definitely cheaper to have a crack addiction.
I'm not sure about that, but I did figure it out. I would guess that on average, a competitive Magic player spends about $5,000 a year on Magic. Yeah, that includes travel expenses, tournament fees, Pro Tour qualifier entry fees, things like that, hotel rooms, all of that.
Hmm.
If you're a good Magic
Yeah.
player, you don't have to buy Magic cards, but you do have to travel.
Uh,
You
we were talking about Kickstarter, and honestly, I'm amazed that more like third-party RPG publishers don't have like Kickstarter as like the central point of their business strategy. And I think we're getting there, but it's amazing. Like, well, okay, so for mine, I did most of the Kickstarter stuff. My publisher had done one with another creator one time, but when we were talking about the plan for the book, his didn't involve Kickstarter, and I really, really wanted a Kickstarter campaign to be kind of central to how we funded the book and put it out. Just because, well, on just a base level. So the big like RPG web stores are Drive Through RPG, RPG Now. You got Paizo.com, a couple others. Depending on the web store, they're taking about 35% of just gross, whatever's sold.
right,
Kickstarter, well, again, it's high, takes 10%.
closer to
That's
12,
huge. I'm sorry?
closer to 12.
Really? Because I know that Kickstarter takes 5 and Amazon takes 2 to 5%.
PayPal.
So the other 2%.
Oh yeah, or not PayPal. Um, if you watch closely, you'll find out that there's about another 2% hidden in
Ah,
there.
I'll have to look. I'll have to look
That
more closely.
actually that comes from it might be different for RPGs and certain sizes of transactions. If you had international transactions, it's going to be higher.
Oh, that's right.
So he might be figuring that in to his equation.
Mm, gotcha. Well, and then you also have just a certain number of cancellations and stuff. But even so, even if it's 12%, that's just less than half of what an RPG store is going. The other thing too, and I'm sure you saw this with your own Kickstarter, is with a Kickstarter campaign, you can easily bundle up a bunch of different products. Like one of my most popular reward levels was $50 for a print book, which $50 for a print book is expensive, but that was bundled with, again, things I couldn't sell otherwise. Playtest access via the forum, a couple other books that had been offered by my publisher, and then some ones that we locked through stretch goals. And I think that bundle was something that was a lot of value and something that would have been much harder to offer if I had done a traditional release for the adequate commoner. The other thing too,
Certainly.
I you can go insane with promoting stuff, and it can just eat up all your life. And
Yes.
not only that, but it's very easy to cross that invisible line where you go from like a dude trying to tell other people about a cool thing you did or want to do to now you're a human spam bot, right? And I found that like having a Kickstarter campaign, you can do it longer, but most of them are for a month. Just having that to dial into both was great for my sanity and great for making sure I didn't cross that kind of invisible barrier to like, okay, now he's being annoying, right?
Right.
Because maybe you see it a couple times. I do it like once a week on a certain community you're on for a month, and then it's done, and I don't have to do it anymore. And I am so happy about that.
I actually ran mine for 14 days, and I mean, it was. I only had about 20 backers, but it was. I'm glad it was only 14 days. I wouldn't have liked the because mine was so small. I wouldn't have liked the in between time. I
Yeah.
would.
Oh
I
yeah.
gotta push it harder. I gotta push it harder.
Yeah.
But
Well,
you know, only doing it for the 14 days was all I needed, and you know, it turned out to be good. It was a good experience. Um, I'm leaning much more towards Patreon. I've spent a lot of time studying what other people are doing, and I just totally disagree with some of the tactics that are out there. Patreon's monthly,
yeah. Exactly.
so if somebody's gonna give you $20 to get a coffee cup, you better give them a coffee cup every month.
Yeah.
I mean, to some degree, yeah, they're agreeing to it, and it's on them. But man, that's just like that's an expensive coffee cup. And I'm sorry, even if I made $1 million a year, I don't think I could justify it. It's a coffee cup. I mean, it's just, and that's why my Patreon is really trying to focus. I'm hoping that that's where I've gone with it, um, to focus on it being a membership,
Yeah. Definitely.
where it can continually grows as we grow. The more people that come in and become part of the community, the more opportunities there are. Like I'm hoping to have all kinds of playtest opportunities. I don't know if you're familiar with Sirenscape.
No. Tell me
Ben
about it.
Ben Loomis is from Australia. He created Sirenscape, which is a I don't even know how to describe it. It's a music
Escape of Sirens.
basically, but I mean it's so much more. It's an audio program that
Okay.
allows you to take pre-designated tracks where you can then adjust them. And what they'll do is like they'll have a themed mood of raining weather with some what they'll call witches music. And it might be some heavy, harsh harp harpsichord type music, and then they'll add sound effects like orcs growling, wolves howling, and you can change the rates at which these things happen. So you can create your own custom background music for your RPGs or for whatever else. And
Nice.
he creates two complete themes every month. Now the when it goes live and he has the complete package for $10 a month, you'll be able to get the creators package as well as just the player, and you'll be
Hmm.
able to create your own sound effects and your own backdrops. That if you didn't do anything illegal, they'll share with the community. That,
Nice.
but he's going to offer one free month once it's up and rolling. So everybody who subscribes at the $10 level will get their money back for the month because they got that trial for $10. So I mean,
Nice.
it's things like that. I'm hoping. Let's see, who is it? Couple. I'm hoping that I can get MegaCon Games on for possible playtesting opportunities. Uh, I was going to try and get Paizo to do playtesting opportunities, but they always make public announcements, so it kind of defeats the purpose. It does. Maybe I can get Watsy to do that, playtest opportunities, and I'm looking into, other exclusives. Derpy Games made a game called Nanobots, but they get these little promotional cards that they put into their card game, and they give away two every time somebody buys the game, and they're basically like online redeemable coupon codes for euchre. And they told me at the last con I was at with them that they're the guys who sell them to them tell them they're worth $500 a piece. And I'm like,
Wow.
it's a piece of cardboard. I mean, it's not Magic the Gathering. It's euchre redeemable. I mean, come on, it's euchre redeemable. I mean, and that's not to diss euchre players. I've played plenty of Pinochle.
No, I wanted to go on record that Through Gamer Goggles is dissing on euchre players right now.
Oh, then I'm dissing on my grandmother. Well, she never. No, she would have never played Euchre. It was. They were
Bringing the
pinochle.
grandmas into this.
They were pinochle players. That's actually kind of how I started gaming. Technically, I guess I didn't really consider cards gaming until I don't know, probably Magic the Gathering. So,
Hey, gin rummy back in the day with my grandma.
well, we actually kindergarten. I was playing War. I mean, I don't know if you ever played War, but you basically
I
shuffle.
played war.
Yeah, I mean, I played that as a kid. That was that was it. You played card games. Didn't really do too many board games. I didn't like Monopoly that much. Played some Risk.
Monopoly just drags on. Risk is fun. The exception is you kind of need like an automatic dice roller because eventually you could reach that point where you have an armada versus an armada,
Yeah,
and yeah, you're gonna be rolling dice for the next half an hour.
my problem was my brothers had at least 6 years on me, so the maturity level when I learned to play Risk was not that good. So they just owned me, and
That could,
I never had a thing for Risk after that. But then
yeah.
I got into RPGs in high school and kind of got out of them in college, and then got back into them when I had a store. It's an interesting life, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I look at a lot of these Kickstarters, and I'm just like, really? Here's a good example. Promos. Um,
Okay.
promos are generally things that are given to people for either volunteering or, you know, they're given away by manufacturers. I see a lot of Kickstarters where they get promos kind of secondhand from manufacturers, and obviously, the manufacturers gave it to them to support them. But it's like, guys, all you got to do is do this and you get the promo anyway. You don't have to pay $10 to this guy or $15 or whatever it is. I just I was offered promos for my Gen Con Kickstarter, and I couldn't use them. I could not bring myself to use them. I just didn't feel right. And I think that came from being a judge for Magic the Gathering and a judge for WizKids for the amount of years I was, because at least with Magic the Gathering, when they give you judge foils, they don't release those to the public for some time. And sometimes they're worth money. Like they did Force of Will this year, and when those first came out, they were $2,000 a piece. You'd go to a Grand Prix and you go to another Grand Prix the next week, you'd have 8 grand as a judge. I mean, so I don't know. I didn't feel right with that approach. Maybe my mind will change by next year, but I like the idea of giving them something, but I think it should be something that's more unique to what you're doing, as opposed to something that's already out there for another purpose. Which I know
Yeah,
that
I can see that.
it's a fine line. Um, I mean, it would be
Well, right, exactly. Because go ahead.
it would be a totally different scenario if I had designed the promo card and then they were
Mm,
using it for
hmm
a whole bunch of stuff, or if maybe the promo card was designed in tandem to help promote through Gamer Goggles. That would be a totally different story. Um,
If it's just unrelated material, it feels weird to you to like offer it up that way. I can see that.
hey,
I
it's
will say though, like, while that is definitely an issue, I don't know. I think that you can have value being the kind of guy because I wouldn't know how to get promos, right? Like I wouldn't know how to get someone to offer me promotional items for my Kickstarter because of your relationships and because of who you are and what you do. You do have that option to offer those, and I think that if that has value to people, I don't think it's necessarily wrong to offer that as something valuable and as a thank you for people backing you. Because here's the real secret, right? On a basic level, people want to give money to artists and creators they like. They really do. That's something they want to do. The trick is you kind of have to do this. I don't want to describe it as sleight of hand because that has a negative connotation. But basically, you have to have some kind of trappings on which they can do that, and it makes sense on an understandable level. But really, what's there is a sincere desire to support the artist. And some people can do it in such a way that, like, hey, they basically are doing busking, right? They're like, I'm going to do this performance, and here's my hat, and put money in it. They can do that. Some people have to do more like, okay, I'll give you the CD. And it just really depends on the artist, but understand that at the base is that sincere desire to support you.
That's a good way to look at it. I'll have to think about that. That's a lot to chew on.
It
Um,
is, and it's a really hard step for every working creative. I know that was I mean, again, it takes a lot of arrogance to kind of make things because there's so much amazing work out there, right? Like, perfect example. I'm making this book for the Adequate Commoner. I don't really have much of a rep writing games. I have 1,000 reasons why it'll never work. I shouldn't do it. It's not worth anybody's time. But you kind of got to get over that and say, yeah, no, I think this is worth people's time. I think that you should support me and give people an opportunity to do that.
yeah, I never intended for any of this to happen. The whole blog was started pretty much because of a challenge, and this is where I'm at. That was 3 years ago, and I'm 400 videos in.
Wow.
Yep.
Just keep doing it, man.
Well, my goal, if I can get enough backing and support from manufacturers slash Patreon, because one of the things I actually right now, my goal is to break away from getting review copies from manufacturers and actually giving them the money back for the support they've given me. That's part of what I want to do, and provide them with other services, other than like free reviews, uh, because well, they're not really free in a sense for the most part. A lot of times, you get you get product, and you get other fringe benefits. You get to meet with people. Sometimes you get invited to parties. You get cool things. You know,
Mhm.
you get inside information to things and stuff like that. Uh, but I would really like to get to the point where I don't have to say, "Hey, you've got this game coming out. Would you like me to review it?" Or I could be like, there's a couple companies that pretty much just, okay, we're sending you some stuff, and I get stuff, and it's like, wow, this is a lot of stuff. You don't expect this like in the next 10 days, do you? And there's some companies that just work with you that well, once you get going. But I would really like to be able to get to the point where, it's like, okay, now I can buy everything that I want to review and really focus on not necessarily just the things I like, but sometimes people ask me to review things, and I'm like, well, that's not really in my budget, and I can't get a copy. So I want to get to the point where if I get 15 requests to review a game, I can just go buy the game, and I don't have to ask for it. The next day, I can film the review. That's where I want to.
Right. Well, now have you incorporated in your Patreon a feature where your backers kind of decide what you review next?
Kind of, sort of, um, to a degree. There's going to be a monthly chat where we can talk about things like that. The whole Patreon thing is there, there's not a whole lot of information on how to set it up. I don't know how much I can and can't change it after it's launched. So I've kind of left some of the areas a little gray, um, especially with the milestones, because I don't know how much I can and can't add. I don't want to place it I've got ideas for doing things. I think all the way out to $8,000. And it's just a matter of to what degree. Well, to what degree can I do it alone?
Yeah.
Because by the time you hit $8,000, you better have a staff. Um, and to what degree do you want to take all those shows to increase quality? Like, one of my dreams is I love to cook. I've been cooking since fourth grade. I want to add
Hmm.
a cooking show to Through Gamer Goggles.
Okay.
I want to add,
Through
maybe
gamer kettles.
I don't know what it's going to be called, but maybe it'll be a game and a meal or something like that, or we'll
Hmm.
do like a quarterly game day where I have 10 or 15 good friends over, or the guys from Silvervine Games. They're all from the Ohio area. Maybe we just get together and we have a dinner and we chat about game design in role playing games. because
Hmm.
that's what they do. And I think something like that would be cool. And then I can have like, okay, this was the meal, this is how it's prepared, and you lead up those videos to that meal type of thing. They'd all be short. I did actually one of the very first video I ever filmed was how to make bread. It was with this crappy camera from 1998 that was high definition. The video's got like 3,000 video views. It, it's
Nice.
it's only 3 years old. I mean, and it's like, wow. I look at that, I'm like, the quality of that video is garbage, but it's one of my most popular videos. So I should be cooking. I mean, my role playing game stuff, sometimes my miniature stuff is really good, but largely the role playing, I've got the flip through books of the books. I've pretty much got that down to a pretty good formula. They depending, I mean, obviously the name helps. Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, of course, that name's going to help a lot when you do a video and you put it up. But I've got them down to about 7 minutes, and I think the favorite comment I've ever received is, "You are far too unpopular on YouTube." So and I do like, I don't know if you can, yeah, you can kind of see them. They're back there, the Pathfinder pawns boxes. I
Yeah.
do I do box breakings on those. And they're like 15 minutes long. I've got two or three people who come back and they're like, it's really silly, but I enjoy watching these every time you make it. And it is silly. The first time I ever did it, I'm like, this is so stupid. I thought it was. But then again, I thought the whole concept was dumb when I started. And,
Well, your viewers disagree. Well, hey, I gotta tell you, my computer's just about in the last legs for battery power, and it's really checking on my daughter anyway, who is 3 months old. But yeah, it was really great talking to you.
looks good. Maybe again sometime in the future. I'll
Yeah,
get you a link for this. It usually takes about a day to show up in my channel. So
yeah, no worries.
um, I'll get that to you. But yeah, it was nice chatting, and we got way off topic of your book, but that's all okay. That's kind of what the point of the hangout is.
Definitely. Well, hey, have a good night, and great talking to you.
You too. Thanks for watching. Oh, and speaking.